Welcome to the Dr. Mudgil podcast. This is episode 138, and it is hot, very hot here in New York. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I will never complain about the heat. I hate the cold. But that being said, it is hot, especially when 3 of your ACs are out in your home. And I've actually been sleeping on the couch the last few days because it's so hot in my room. But I have some wonderful folks working on the repair right now as we record this. And hopefully I'll go home to an air-conditioned house and have a good night's sleep tonight. But it's hot. It's hot out there. And it's really feels like the summer of my youth, where on the news they'd always say it's, Triple H today, hazy, hot, and humid. And that's kind of what it's like. But again, I'm loving every second of it. Had a great weekend. Snuck away to Bermuda for a few days for my birthday last weekend with the fam. And we had an awesome time. If you haven't been to Bermuda, I highly suggest it. It's an amazing place. It's a beautiful place. I think the best beaches in the world are actually in Bermuda. They're really incredible. The water is warm. It's crystal blue, pink sand. Just a nice place to go. It's a very, very quick trip from New York, which makes it very easy. It's just like an hour and a half flight. And we had a wonderful time this weekend. It was great. It's just chilling out with my family. But back at it. Came back to work. Started seeing patients again on Monday, catching up on some slides, etc. And over the course of this last couple of weeks, I've been kind of having this thought brewing in my mind, and just been trying to hash it out. And it's actually something I've spoken about before, but the more I think about it, the more I realize it, for lots of reasons. One is when you're a parent, you see how your kids are developing with their mindsets, etc., how they're developing their mindsets and their attitudes towards certain things, whether it be like academics or sports, etc. And when you have a business, through the years, God, it's been like 15 years, I've employed more people than I can count. Just have lots of folks who I've had lots of employees and lots of employees who are no longer here, obviously for reasons like they're going off to school or, moving, etc. But I've actually had a lot of amazing employees and a lot of absolutely terrible employees through the years. But again, I always think about mindset and the folks that are like the best folks to be around, the folks that I love working alongside as having part of my team. And fortunately, I have a whole bunch of them on my team. But what I've realized through the years, and this is also through doing a lot of introspection, is that there's 2 types of folks in this world. And I've been on both sides of the fence. So, I know from personal experience, again, like I said, I did a lot of introspection when thinking about what I wanted to say today. There's 2 types of mindsets. There are folks that do the minimum amount required, and then there's folks who try to do the best that they can. And again, I've been on both sides of this fence. And, I've mentioned it many, many times. I was kind of an academic late bloomer. I kind of hit my stride in 10th grade. And, my mom always used to say, I think she probably still says it to this day, but it's not really true anymore. But growing up, my mom always said, Adarsh, he's very smart, but he's very, very lazy. And it was true. I was good at taking tests. I was always in accelerated math and those sorts of things. But I was lazy. I was a very bad student. I would never do my homework. I get in all sorts of trouble and stuff too in school. I was, not an easy kid. I apologize to my mom for all the grief I gave her. But in our high school, I grew up on the South Shore of Long Island. We moved from Brooklyn to a town called Oceanside. And in my high school, it was a class of about 400 kids in each class. And each class was kind of divided into 3 tracks, but really there was 2 tracks. There was an AP track where 40 kids would be taking these, at college level, AP classes. And then there was something called an honors track. And then there was just a regular track. And that distinction is really made when you get into 10th grade. So when I was in 9th grade, again, I was still not a great student at all. And, my teachers, all they really knew about me was, my performance in class. And, it was pretty bad, to be honest with you. But my mom knew that, okay, because my brother, who's 7 years older than me, went to the same high school. She's like, I got to Adarsh needs to get into this AP track. So back in those days, parents, I guess parents still have a lot of influence, but she muscled my way into the AP track. And it was a totally different world. So I have some friends who are still my best friends to this day, to be honest with you, who I've known since elementary school, 7th grade, that sort of stuff as well. And two of my best friends were in this AP track, and now I was alongside them academically. We're all taking the same classes, and it's amazing. And this is something that I think about with my kids a lot. Really, those two friends of mine, both of them are named John, had a tremendous impact on my trajectory. I was hanging out with them, and they were like cool, great guys and lots of fun, but they were really, really smart, and they were very academically oriented. And their influence on me at that time really kind of changed, my perception of school and how much effort I wanted to put in. So, I was always someone who did the minimum amount required. And, these two guys wanted to do things well, right? And, we had sort of different mindsets. The truth is my mindset didn't really change much. I kind of still had that mindset of doing the minimum amount required. So now is like the minimum amount required to get an A. I really didn't care much about learning. It was just really, there was always like, okay, I have to do well in school to, get into a good college. And when the time came to go to college, the damage had already been done. Your grades from like 9th grade count towards college. And even though, I did very well after that, and, I did fine on my SATs and all that sort of stuff, I just, I applied to, a bunch of Ivy League schools and, a bunch of other, the sort of next tier schools. And, my buddies, John and John, went on to, one went to Columbia, one went to Stanford. I got rejected from all of those top tier schools, and I ended up going to Emory University in Atlanta, which is, I'm not knocking Emory, it's my alma mater, but it's not like Harvard or Yale or one of those types of schools, right? And, my mindset when I got into medical school was kind of the same. The next step was, okay, I got to get into medical school. So my mindset was, okay, do the minimum amount required to get into medical school. And that was my mindset through college. Emory wasn't that tough for me. I had nearly a 4.0. I did have a B+ first semester freshman year. Dr. Carlson, macroeconomics, which is the one blemish on my record. And my mom actually threatened to pull me out of Emory and send me to the local state school, which is called SUNY Stony Brook, if I didn't get my grades up. So I had a 4.0 from there on out because my mom was not messing around. I talked about that look in my last podcast, and she gave me that look when she saw my report card, which wasn't that bad. It was a 3.776. I remember my first semester, and she said, "You're going to bring home grades like this and you're done. So you have one more chance to get your shit together. Otherwise, I'm pulling you out." And she was serious. She gave me that look. So anyways, I did the minimum amount required to get a 4.0 for the rest of college, which really, honestly, wasn't that much at the time. So I got into medical school, and my first year of medical school. So medical school is a different beast. I went to SUNY Stony Brook Medical School, which is an amazing place. And my class there was pretty much like 60% kids from or maybe more from Ivy League schools, Harvard, Yale, UPenn, Princeton, all these great schools. And there was a bunch of kids from Duke and all these other great schools. And then there was a bunch of kids from the Emorys, John Hopkins, U Chicago's, all those sorts of schools. And then there's some kids from other schools. So, it was definitely a concentrated class of very, very smart people. There were 100 kids in my class. So after my first year of medical school, my friend from Emory, who was a really, really smart, hardworking guy, his name is Sammy, he came to visit me, and he asked me, hey, how are you doing in medical school? I said, I'm doing pretty good. I'm in the bottom of the top half of the class. So if there was 100 kids in the class, I was ranked probably somewhere in number 40 in my class. Say I was not just solidly the bottom of the top half of the class. And he looked at me just with a very serious look, and he said, "Hey man, why don't you just try? For once in your life, why don't you just try?" I think those were his exact words, because he kind of knew my mindset. I would just do the minimum amount required to get an A. In med school, I did the minimum amount required to be in the top half of my class. And I don't know, something about that just really just hit me really hard in the chest. And it was it literally was that moment. I can just think about that moment. And it was an incredible mindset shift for me. I was like, you know what? God, my friend is thinks I'm wasting potential. He basically thinks I'm a loser and that I should be working harder. And, things really changed for me. It's not that I worked much harder, but, when I studied, my first year of medical school, when I'd study, I just kind of go through, each class is transcribed. So there's notes of each class. And I would just go through those notes a million times before the test and try to cram in as much material as possible. and I'll take the test, and sometimes I do great, sometimes I do okay. Like I said, I was somewhere in the bottom half of the top half, the bottom part of the top half of the class. But that next year, I actually was like, okay, let me just try to like learn this material. So I would read each transcript one time, very, very slowly, and try to like really understand the concepts. And it was like a total game changer for me. It was like something just completely changed. And it's like, why don't you just try, right? And I really was just trying, instead of trying to like take a test to get to the next step, I was trying to learn. And medical school became totally different for me at that point. Like the average on a test would be like 70, I'd get like a 95. I ended up graduating at the very top of my medical school class, not because I was working harder, I was just working smarter. I was working with good intent. I wasn't just trying to do the minimum amount possible to get by. I was trying to do the best I can and learn the material the best I can. And that was a really transform. I was probably like 23, I guess, at the time, and that's really my mindset towards everything changed just because of that one conversation. And there's so many examples of this, not just school. Like I remember when my daughter was in 6th grade, I used to drive her to school very early in the morning. Middle school starts at like 7:20 something in where we live. So I'd drive my daughter at like 7 in the morning. And sometimes, well, most of the times when I drove her, she would want to stop at Starbucks on the way to school. It's like, right, we passed by one. So we'd stop at Starbucks like nearly every morning. And there was one barista that was there that he would I forget what she would get. It was like probably like, I think it was like some kind of decaf latte or whatever. But it was something that was like a latte where there was like work involved in making it. And the barista, he would always put like a little heart or something cute for my daughter, when he would make this. And, just took that extra effort to do that. Whereas like, most other people, I've talked about like this Starbucks story or similar Starbucks story where there's also like one barista who's like just hustling and doing all these things. And there's always someone that you see just kind of like lazily going through the day. There's someone who's doing the minimum amount required to get through the day, but still get their paycheck. And there's someone that's just trying to do the best that they can. And this guy was trying to do the best that he could. And, in probably one of my daughter, as my daughter would say, when one of my more cringy moments, I actually acknowledged this one day to the barista. I said, we're walking out, and I just turned back around and said, hey man, I got to tell you something. I was like, don't think what you're doing is going unnoticed. Like, it's so obvious to me that you're not trying to just get through your day. You're trying to do the best job that you can. And there's a real difference. And people do notice that. Like, that's someone that in a second I would love to hire to be part of my team and to help me get through my day and to help care for the patients that I have in the practice. It's just a different type of mindset that some people have. I'll give you another example, or another couple of examples. And this is actually what made me think about this podcast. A couple of Fridays ago, I saw a patient who was like, really, really nervous about having like a particular diagnosis. And we did some blood work on her. And, she actually didn't even want to get the blood work. But she's like, I don't even know if I want to know. Like, I was really nervous about it. I was like, listen, there's very high likelihood that this blood test is going to come back favorable and you have nothing to worry about. There's like, a 99% chance of that. So I think, you want to know. So you don't have to worry. Otherwise, you're going to be in a constant state of worry. She said, you know what, you're right. Let's do the blood test. And I told her the blood test usually comes back in a couple of days. Well, it turns out her blood test came back the following Saturday morning at like 7:30 in the morning, or like really, really early in the morning. And then by the time I checked it on my phone, it was like maybe like 8:15 or 8:20 or something like that. So I saw that the blood test came back, negative. She had nothing to worry about. So I went into the messaging app. I knew she was worried about it. So I went into the messaging app like Saturday morning to send her a message, say, hey, so-and-so, everything is fine. You have nothing to worry about. You're totally healthy. And when I went to do it, I saw that my physician's assistant in my city office sent her a message at 7:30, like the 7:30 a.m. on a Saturday, a day she wasn't even working. The second this message came out, the second this email came through, and she took the initiative on her day off to send this message to my patient who was worried. And God, I felt so good. I was like, wow. I was like, this is somebody who's not just going through the motions, not just trying to do the minimum amount possible, the minimum requirements to have. This is someone who cares about people, who's trying to do the best job that they can. And I was so proud of her, and I was just so amazed that just so proud to have her as part of my team. And then even today, so we do a lot of cosmetic things in my practice, and usually if I do like a cosmetic procedure like laser or filler or something like that, we always call the patients the next day to make sure they're doing okay, or address any concerns that they may have. And I sign my notes generally on the following day. So like this yesterday was a Wednesday. This morning I got up, going through all the notes from the patients that were seen yesterday, reviewing everything. And this particular patient came up and I was like, okay, I'm going to send a message to my PA just to call the patient and check in. And same thing happened. I went to send the message and there was already a message there for me. Hey, Dr. Mudgil, I call the patient. She's doing great. She's got a little bit of swelling, but she's not concerned. She feels really good. I was like, wow. I was like, again, this is like someone who is not doing the minimum amount required of them. Because I was so excited and so proud that message was waiting for me, but it wasn't my expectation that she did that. I just assumed I'd send her the message and she just messaged me later in the day saying, hey, everything's fine, or, whatever the case may be. But it made me so proud. It made me just realize how much value that all of us should get to the world. There's two types of folks. There's folks that do the minimum amount required to get the job done. And there's folks who have, an internal barometer of what they should be doing. And they want to do things at the highest level. And they want to do things well. And listen, I'm blessed to have I'm blessed to have worked alongside a ton of people like that. I have a great team of folks that share that similar value system. It's not just about doing the minimum amount required. It's about doing the best job that they can. And, that goes into all aspects of life. It goes into, your professional life. It goes into your personal life, the relationships that you have, taking the effort to reach out to folks, check in on them, send them a happy birthday message, be there for them when they need you. It goes into, fitness and nutrition, all those sorts of things. Like, you can't just do the minimum amount required. You're just not really going to move the needle much. In your own life, you're not going to move the needle much by having that mindset. But by doing the best that you can, that's when you feel an incredible amount of fulfillment. You're putting good karma into the world. Folks acknowledge that. It's just spreading positivity, and that is contagious. So with that, I hope you all have a wonderful, restful weekend. Don't do the minimum amount required. Do the best that you can. Let's get it.